On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don. I'm a consultant in life sciences, and I help companies manage complexity and increase performance. Today on the podcast, my guest is Elizabeth Smalley. She is the senior director, or senior product manager at our ArisGlobal with over 15 years of experience across data analytics. Elizabeth has a passion for exploring the intersection of data science and human reasoning, and has experience in bringing AI-powered software to market to drive safety and clinical outcomes for patients and clinicians. So with that, welcome, Elizabeth.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. So can you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I mean, you said a lot of it in that very long intro, but I've been in product for well over a decade. I'm currently working with ArisGlobal. We serve life sciences, particularly in the safety realm. Prior to that, I worked with clinical teams to bring software as a medical device to market. And that's where I really started to get interested in how the clinician and the human reasoning intersects with the world of life sciences.
All right. And I mean, I guess that, to dive a little deeper into that. So, I mean, one of the things that I read in here as well is just that you spent a lot of time across data and analytics, and that you have this, sort of focus on, both human reasoning as well as AI powered software, which I mean is a big topic today. I feel like
Yes.
every time you turn around, I attended a separate conference away from life sciences to try and gain some additional capabilities in terms of, just sharing information publicly. And with that, this idea of ChatGPT came up again. And so I feel
Mhm.
like almost like AI it's just everywhere right now, that a lot of people are talking about it, whether they're, new to AI or not, but I just feel like it's everywhere as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think there's more of a focus on it right now, perhaps, than there has been over the last 5 to 10 years. But it's been all throughout our society, even before, today. So I think about it a lot in a clinical or in a life sciences capacity, based on where I sit today. But we see it in society as well. So there's been experiments done in the courtroom to help to try to predict recidivism rates and create models that influences how a judge might think about sentencing based on those rates. And that's where it gets really, really tricky. And we really have to think, how are we bringing human reasoning into this model? If you're thinking about AI as in what Amazon does, bringing great products to consumers, and you have a 1% failure rate, that's great. Amazon's making a lot of money. Most consumers are really, really happy. The 1% is okay. But when you get into these more serious topics that really impact individuals, like clinical settings, or like society settings, a 1% failure rate is no longer acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there are a lot of questions I know right now with regards to, one, having explainable AI, like, the sort of transparency around how did it make the decisions that it made, all the way through to, you know, just really informing somebody in terms of how things are done, but with it, by including this idea of, diversity inside of the model as well, and making sure that, it's all inclusive, not just sort of thinking one way or the other as we might have in the past.
Yeah. So with these models, we see a lot of bias can be written into the model. This can happen from the programmers, their inherent bias that perhaps they're not aware of, and also the training sets that we may use to train these models. We know can create bias in the models as well. And so again, this is where I come back to how do you keep that human reasoning and that human, maybe even oversight is a good word, oversight and insight
Mm,
in the loop on these things? Perhaps not as critical for your, consumer and retail type applications, but certainly in what we're thinking about in the future of pharmacovigilance at Aris Global, it's a human in the loop, human insight, human reasoning on top of that.
yeah, absolutely. And so can you tell us just a little bit about who is Eris Global and what do they do?
Sure. So Aris Global is a global leader in pharmacovigilance technology for life sciences. So we serve pharmaceutical companies, CROs, in the pharmacovigilance domain. So we have a very well-known Leicester multivigilance product that helps these companies ingest their case data, automation to process that data. And then where I plug in is we have a very strong signaling application that helps these companies look across all of that data to determine, is there any new information out there that changes the benefit risk profile of their products? Are consumers safe? Are patients safe?
Mhm.
And are their drugs effective post clinical trial?
Very good. And then can you tell us about the different products that they have in the space?
Sure. So I'm going to probably focus on the signaling part of the equation because that's where I spend most of my time. So Eris Global just released a new product, LifeSphere Clarity, that brings in additional data sets to help the clinician determine causality. So again, leaving plenty of space for that human reasoning. And maybe a little background is helpful here. So, in pharmacovigilance, a lot of the signal detection is based on spontaneous reporting. This is where you're taking a drug and you're feeling sick to your stomach. You think it's the drug, or maybe your doctor thinks it's the drug, and you file a report. So, this has been the system for 80 years. It's really the backbone, and there's a lot of well known limitations there. It's reactive. We're waiting for you to report something. By some estimates, there's up to 40% underreporting happening, and it's very limited amount of information to try to assess causality from. So, point in time, I may not know how long you took that drug for. I may not know what other medicines you're taking. It's very complex to try to determine causality. So Arts Global's released a product now, LifeSphere Clarity, that helps share with the clinician all the possible causal pathways for this group of cases or this single case that somebody is looking at. So now bringing in the AI to help augment the human reasoning in that capacity. We also have our standard signaling product that does traditional signaling. Those of your audience in the industry will know what that means. And then, of course, our premier safety product, like Sphere Multivigilance, that helps automate through AI a lot of that case processing and take the burden off of the pharmacovigilance teams. And then we also have strong products in regulatory and clinical space too.
That's where I was gonna ask next because I saw on the list of products for Eris Global that there were risk management product lines, and so that was gonna be my quick question there as well. I don't wanna leave anybody out as we go through the relatively long list of products that Eris Global provides.
And it's a relatively long list because Eris Global really covers safety end to end. And we've been talking about products, but we like to think of it as a platform. And back to how do we connect all of that underlying data, bring AI into the picture, and also create through that platform a patient centric pharmacovigilance operations. So this is something we see a lot in the clinical space today, getting more patient centric, right? You see this with accountable care organizations, focusing on patient outcomes instead of fee for service. And it's time for safety pharmacovigilance to follow suit, to focus on the entire patient story instead of just these spontaneous cases that are very reactive, very point in time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, and in terms of the companies that you work with, where do companies normally come in to start to act with ArisGlobal? I work all the way from early startups to mid stage to even later stage companies. Normally, when would a client call ArisGlobal, to become a client?
So we have a very big presence in top 50, so the larger players in the market, but we're also making really specific efforts to serve smaller organizations and CROs. And so we've extended our products and extended our pricing models in a way that we can do that. I would say emerging pharma. I mean, every pharmaceutical industry is required to monitor these cases and have a safety plan in place, and a risk plan in place for all of their products. And as emerging pharma starts to grow, what happens is they start to get more and more and more adverse events coming in. And at some point, they need products to help manage that. It's just too big of a risk otherwise.
Okay. And in terms of your specific focus, a lot of times we talk about the individuals and the career that they have. Tell us more about what is a senior product manager at Eris Global? What sort of is your day to day? What sort of things are you focused on?
Sure. So I am actually director of product management for data and analytics
Sorry
at
about that.
ArisGlobal. That's okay, but it changes the focus. So
Mm,
what we are really, really focused on is revolutionizing the industry with advanced AI ML to drive quicker signal detection, faster time to insights for pharmacovigilance teams and for patients. So if we detect safety signals faster, this means fewer patients are harmed by them. This means sponsors are able to react quicker, and it means better outcomes for sponsors and for the patient. If we can drive to insight faster, this means that it is easier for those teams to understand, to really scientifically show causality between their drug and an adverse event. And again, better patient safety. But it also means that we can turn those same technologies to looking for opportunities to repurpose drugs. What does that mean? That means better access to health products for the patient. Once we find opportunities to repurpose, we learn that a drug can help you with, say, your cluster headaches. We didn't know that before. We've learned that from our signaling process. Now you have access to a medication you never had access before, and you didn't have to wait 10 years for somebody to discover a molecule, run through a clinical trial, prove its safety. All that's been largely done. So we spend a lot of time with industry, understanding what the needs are, with regulators, understanding how to bring AI models into this atmosphere. So that is really our focus, is revolutionizing how that happens today.
very
And
good.
my focus as director of product management for data and analytics.
Excellent. And then what are some of the biggest challenges that you see in terms of life sciences where, being in this field, I feel like comes with a lot of different challenges. And that I especially appreciate it whenever people share, their perspective.
Sure. So, as a technologist, we like to move very, very fast, and we like to experiment with our technology. And when you're in this comes back to the AI conversation, right? When you're in an industry like life sciences or clinical setting, there's not room for that kind of experimentation. So we're highly, highly regulated, of course. And so we have to approach things a little bit differently than you might in a B2C type application. So that's there. You bring that in financial industries as well. And in fact, we take some cues on AI from there. I would say that's one of the bigger challenges. And then just in life sciences in particular, we have large issues with disparate data, right? We have data on each of our sponsors. We have all the different EMRs out there, the claims data out there, really rich data sources. Everyone recognizes the value but how do you bring it all together in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I mean, one of the things I've said on previous shows as well is just this idea of the in no other industry that I can think of is there the same separation that you have from the standpoint of the person who receives the whatever the product is typically also is not the person who more or less pays for that product. They may pay in some ways through insurance plus additional cost or other things, but oftentimes that's not the case. And then it's not the same person that makes the decision in terms of the product. And so all of those separations that we have throughout things, as well as, even the manufacturing side is another separation that you have, in our industry. And it just, I mean, it causes sort of these data that the data then is not continuous. And then also inside of the companies themselves, the data is not continuous either.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad you brought that up because even when our customers at ArisGlobal, we see some of that happening where you have these data silos. And we are rolling out or have rolled out our data fabric, which is an enabling architecture designed in part to break down those silos, which is what you're going to have to do to enable that patient centric model.
Oh, very, very important. Yeah. And then where do you see that are the biggest opportunities in life sciences then?
I'm really glad you asked that because that's my right where we're working on at ArisGlobal. So that one of the biggest opportunities is in the signaling domain. So I mentioned we've been using these spontaneous reports for 80 some odd years. They are very valuable, but there's a lot of well-known limitations there. It's really time now to start to break down those limitations. So what we're seeing is regulators have already accepted real-world data in the FDA and in the European Union, with the FDA Sentinel Initiative, for example. And they're now embarking on opportunities to bring in real world evidence. So the FDA recently launched their Advancing Real World Evidence program, which is where they're asking sponsors to come in with a real world evidence proposal. And they're meeting with, I believe it's 2 a year for the next 5 years. And one of the stated goals of this program is to help develop guidance for how real world evidence is incorporated into regulatory decisions. So how do we start to use all this real world data, EMRs and these claims data to generate clinical evidence that extends a clinical trial, maybe in the future replaces a clinical trial for low risk repurposing applications, which is going to bring medicines to market faster for the patient population. It also means that we have an opportunity now that the regulators have led the way to bring in that real world data to our signaling process, which will break down these limitations that we see in the case reports. It's going to let you be proactive instead of reactive. I don't need to wait for my reports. I can go out and scan the data and see what the correlations are from your clinician visits. It also allows us to start to move to hypothesis-free signal detection. So not necessarily, there may be an event happening with a drug that I still have a hypothesis on. It never crossed my mind. I didn't see it in clinical trials. It's not what I expected. Using that real world data would allow us to go out and find those relationships between the drugs and the events for patient safety without a hypothesis and also for repurposing. And so bringing in that real world data for signaling and for real world evidence is clearly, I would say, the biggest opportunities in the industry today.
Excellent. So, Elizabeth, there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
That is a good question. I am inspired by the opportunity to really impact individuals at a meaningful level. And ArisGlobal offers that in the patient safety realm. So all those things I just said, if I can help bring to market faster a medicine that's going to improve your quality of life or save your life, then I've made a real difference, a real impact.
Thank you for sharing that. And then what concerns you?
So what concerns me is how do we keep the human reasoning in the loop? So for the next 5 to 10 years, I think it's clear that we're going to have that human reasoning always there. We're going to need it. We're nowhere near where we would take that human reasoning out at this point.
Yes.
But the industry is going to keep pushing. It's going to keep changing. And so over the next 20, 30 years, how do we develop in a way that we take advantage of the technology we have and we keep that human reasoning in the loop?
Yeah, I think that's an important question for a lot of people that are asking this question of, will AI replace me? Will AI replace, what I am doing? And I personally, the things that I see are promising that, we will see a lot more speed to decision based on
Yes.
some of the things
Yes.
that are there, but a human being is still needed to kind of interpret things and bring it to the final point of decision as well. At this point in time. And yeah, I mean, I just find it, very interesting to watch, what's happening in this space.
So AI is going to help you w- work at the top with your cognitive abilities. So why should you spend time digging through thousands of pieces of data, detecting patterns? I mean, you could do it, but that's not what humans are best at. Humans are best at interpreting that insight and applying reasoning to it.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm, oftentimes whenever I'm having conversations with people about kind of the AI side, at least from my perspective, it's if you use the scientific method to kind of evaluate decisions, what I'm not seeing today is the ability, um, for something that can't be clearly laid out in a, kind of a checklist form, for AI to make that same level of decision. If you need to provide, I mean, a lot of patients in our space, right, they have cancer. So providing empathy to patients is, again, not something, that can be easily replaced. And so those sort of things overall, I can see that, are going to be a continued challenge for the, the systems in AI to be able to replace as well.
For sure. I'd have to agree with you.
And then lastly, what excites you?
How is that different than what inspires me?
Very
I
good.
think it may be the same thing.
Oh, I mean, it's a great sort of question. I mean, I guess the way I think about it is, the inspiration, in a lot of ways comes from, sort of the things in the backgrounds, that may sort of cause you to move forward. To me, excites is all about, what are the things that you really want to put energy into on a daily basis?
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I am mostly excited today about the new products that ArisGlobal is bringing to market that are focused on real world data and real world evidence. It's such an interesting space. I think we're leaders in bringing this kind of technology to market, and so it's very, very exciting to be on the forefront of that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth Smalley, for being here on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.